Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the 1991 Topps baseball images, the best pictures that were in the 1991 Topps baseball set. And this is quite a list. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the cards because the average card in this set was unusually good. This was a year where they took extra care for making great images. And the reason for that was because Topps suddenly found itself in a position it had never been in before. Topps had always been the card. They just cranked out the cards and the whole industry just kind of revolved around them. That changed in 1990 because the whole industry moved past them, because now there was an industry. And Topps got caught flat-footed. In 1988, 1989, they were still basically kind of the foundation of the hobby, but there was so much else going on that the industry was starting to change, and Topps wasn't ready to do that. They really didn't care to because they knew how to make cards. They made cards the same way they always did, and by 1990, it was clear that wasn't going to cut it. But for some reason, in 1991, Topps, Fleer, and Don Russ kept making the same cards in terms of cardstock, just figuring, hey, we'll gussy it up and it'll somehow work. And that just wasn't going to work anymore. Now, for Topps, 1991 was a major year for trying to catch up. So the 1990 card world, it woke Topps up enough to create Stadium Club, and then in 1992 we'd see a lot more changes. But the fact that they still thought they could use the same cardstock for their base brand showed that they were still very optimistic. But optimistic in terms of the cardstock, that's one thing. But in terms of the card design, that they got down. This was their 40th year of making baseball cards. So they were celebrating a tremendous legacy, and they wanted to take advantage of this, and so they needed to make sure that where in 1990 they were becoming second rate, if not third rate, in 91 they wanted to bring it back for the celebration. Again, why they didn't upgrade the cardstock, I don't know, but at least with the card design, they took full advantage of a very high quality card design. But on top of that, they figured something out from 1990 where Score and Pro Set in football, they made some phenomenal cards because they brought in great images. That's what was going on in football. Images were everything. And so Topps decided, hey, let's do that in baseball. They didn't do it in football and hockey. I don't know why, but in baseball, they definitely brought it. And so across this set, there is an unusually impressive standard image. I mean, as you go through the set, the images really do carry well in a way that we really hadn't seen much at all in sports cards. Well, certainly not in baseball. But there were a number of cards that stood out even beyond this. I mean, the cards I'm showing you they're above average. But still, sprinkled throughout, you would often see these types of cards that would just pop up, and it was really cool to see. And I'm going to start off, well before I get to the actual cards that are really distinctive, I'm starting off with what for me is essentially an honorable mention, which is weird in this collection of cards, where I'm doing the only Topps traded card that even belongs on this list, because none of the Topps traded cards have great images. But I got to note, the Bo Jackson card, I love this. Every time that I go through it, it always catches me off guard because when you look at it, it's an unusual shot for the time. In some other sets you might see this, but in this set it's very distinctive. And every time I look at it, I go, oh yeah, that's right. Michael Jordan did batting practice with the Sox. Oh, it's Bo Jackson. It always catches me that way, and it's that Bo Jackson card I always forget about. You know, it's easy to forget the Angels cards in his later career, but this was like the first card of not on his original team. As in, literally, this is probably the main card that was the first card when he wasn't on his original team. So making that transition to Bo Jackson, the superhero, into Bo Jackson, the still kicking around in baseball for a couple of years transition, this card very much stands out. It's very distinctive. And it's a really cool shot. But again, I always look at this and go, oh yeah, Michael Jordan. Oh, right, Bo Jackson. Okay, yeah. And speaking of Kansas City Royals, when I took this set and I reordered it in order like the checklist, so teams are in order and all the players are in alphabetical order, in the binder page, these two cards showed up right next to each other, and it's amazing because they literally look like sequences of the same batter. Obviously they're not, you can tell by the number and by the sleeve, but it's incredible how close these two shots are. And it's, obviously the vantage point is the same, but the fact that you've got the batters positioned exactly the same and swinging exactly the same, and the fact that they actually go in order where T before W, it also has the swing, it always throws me off. And I love, it's purely luck, but I love how in a team-oriented setup, these two cards line right up. Really cool. I just definitely got to give a shout out to it. And then also a note about the Detroit Tigers. Two of the players have this really classic pose. This isn't necessarily an unusual shot as much as in this set. As you're going through the set, little cards pop up here, or images pop up here and there that are kind of distinctive. And with the Tigers, they have these two great classic on your knee with your baseball bat poses of these two players that just have that really classic quality to it. So I always love seeing these come up. And speaking of classic, you've also got Robin Ventura, who is in his classic pinstripes White Sox outfit. Now, this is not the only case of this, because the White Sox did this year. And of all the cards with the pinstripes, the most famous is probably the Comiskey card in Upper Deck. But in Topps, they did actually have a couple of these. But the Robin Ventura card specifically has a great throwback quality. This feels very Field of Dreams like. That, to me, that's what this really comes across as. I've always loved the card, and every time I look at it, it just catches me off guard, and I really love that about it. Then we've got a couple of shots that are from a totally unusual vantage point. And the vantage point isn't really totally unusual as much as it's totally unusual for photos in card sets. It's from the stands. That's the perspective. And you're almost wondering where the photographer is coming from. So what's unusual about it is the fact that this is really the way that we typically see baseball when we're at games and we're lucky enough to be close to the base path. But in cards, you never see this. It is such an unusual shot. And there are a couple more of these shots, but these two in particular really do have a cool feel. So again, that's what's cool about this set, is these cards randomly show up with these very different images that you're not used to seeing. And so it's like gems that pop up all over the place. And these definitely fit that. And then with Eddie Whitson, this is a cool shot of, it feels like behind the scenes. Now, this is not the only case where the catcher is in the foreground out of focus, but this is the one where he and the batter are both dark. And so it gives a behind the scenes shot feel, kind of like you're seeing the shooting of a movie. And the cameraman and the director are in the foreground, and then the action is in the background. It has that kind of feel to it. It's really cool. Plus, this is a great example of how well they designed the card border, because the border is designed very thin with fine detail, which adjusts your eye to presume fine detail in the picture, and it allows you to see a much greater detail. The combination of him, very small, but all the detail in it carries beautifully, and then the foreground is a wonderful counterpoint. I love the way that this comes across. The other shots are kind of cool, but this one shot is, I'm not going to say amazing, but definitely one that's very distinctive. And then we've got a couple of portraits that I think definitely are worth noting. With Terry Steinbach, you have a great combination of static and dynamic at the same time. You're not sure if he's actually looking up for a pop fly, but it's got the feel of the game. And if he is up there for a pop fly, you're wondering how you got onto the field so close to him. But regardless, it looks cool. It's just, it's not an unusual card as much as it's another one of those interesting cards that show up. But with Roger Craig, this one, to me, this is like the ultimate national anthem picture. You could have a whole team with their hats held at their chest, and there are many different ways. To me, this one really has more of that 4th of July, honoring the veterans quality, just the way that it looks. I love the way that this comes across as a national anthem card. So, absolute kudos for this card. And then we have the silhouette cards. And they're not true silhouettes, but they're pretty close. You have the dark background behind the player, and the dark background really makes the player come out very vibrantly. Now, the Frank Thomas card isn't quite as dark as the others. I kind of wish that they had darkened the background. And look, I'm using Photoshop, so I could have darkened it, but I want to show you the way that the card actually looks. But it's not a problem. It's just it could have been a little bit better. But between these three shots, I got to go with Devin White. I think that that is the card of all three of these. I think it looks gorgeous. I really love the way that these have come across. And then as I transition into the very distinctive cards, I'm transitioning across the Dwight Smith card that really there's nothing special about this card, except I always love when the ivy wall is in the background. And in this case, this card does it probably better than any other because you hardly even see the player. It's almost like he's gone from the shot. Because really, it's the ivy wall that we want to be looking at. That's the whole thing. And he's just an excuse for that. It's just a ton of greenery, and I think that that wall is actually swallowing him. Not entirely sure, but regardless, it's a great excuse to look at a really cool outfield wall. Then we got Milt Thompson, and this is the first of the great images. This is not a pose you see very often because it's not a pose you want to be in very often. You definitely don't want to have to get into this position. But the card is very dynamic. So as I go through the pages, the card pulls me in, and then I look and I'm immediately looking, whoa, he is really going back to miss that baseball. And I also start looking down at that right leg going, how is he going to keep that thing from getting in a difficult position? And yes, it would take a football fan to notice that. But regardless, this, again, unusual shots, this is definitely up there. Definitely up there. And then we've got Oscar Azocar. And the Oscar card is just a fun playing around kind of a card, but it's a beautiful playing around kind of card. Every time I look at it, obviously the bat, it really doesn't need any explanation, but the detail is very rich and there's a vibrance to the card and just the playfulness of the ball and the bats. And every time I look at it, the kid in me goes, oh, I want to be able to do that, even though it's really not that hard. It's just a matter of getting used to the forces, and it's very doable. But it's just a little circus trick that looks great on a card. Looks so great that I'm even willing to put a Yankees card here on screen, which is saying quite a bit. You will notice there are no Dodgers cards because there's no Dodgers card that's cool enough to get onto one of my videos. But for cool cards, there is at least one Yankee card that fits. But enough about the Yankees. Let's go to a much better organization, which is the Bo Sox. And here we've got Roger Clemens in one of the great Roger Clemens cards. This is one of those classic cards that really shows off the legend. It's a wonderful pose, and for me, this goes right alongside the 92 Cal Ripken card, where both of those cards have a very distinct presentation that's very similar between the two and really shows off their traditions. You feel like Roger Clemens is a star in the making, which he absolutely was. Very distinctive card. I do love it. But if you want to talk about stars, we can't avoid talking about Rickey Henderson. And Rickey was a great player. He would agree with me, and in fact, he would word it exactly the same way. This is one of the great presentations of Rickey in all of his glory. He's doing what he did best, stealing a base, and the shot is gorgeous. This is a wonderful landscape shot that does a great job of really capturing the whole horizontality of the space. You feel it, and what really makes it work well is the baseman up in the top left corner. You probably didn't even notice that he was there. He blends into the background. But once you see him, all of a sudden the card goes from gorgeous to three-dimensional because it gives you the three phases, the three planes that you need. In order to make a really great shot, it helps to have foreground, middle ground, and background. The foreground is what locks you in. It's what you attach to. And then the middle ground is the focus. And you feel the space between the foreground and the middle ground. Once you've got that, then the background corresponds to that, and you can actually see space within a shot. And it's not very much. There's very little to go with. But the baseman does exactly that, which creates a really cool effect of this entire card. But look, let's face it, this is just a really cool card. I love the way this card comes across. Then we've got to move on to a couple of staged shots. And the first one is Wade Boggs. Amazing shot. Now, This is also a canned shot. It's very much a scripted shot. There is nothing natural about this. I look at this and I go, somebody was looking at the 1990 Score football set. They looked and said, I see what you did with quarterbacks. We can do that with the third baseman. But I don't mind. It's just, this is a poster. As in, this is a poster. And if I had this as a poster, I'd put it on my wall. I'm not a Wade Boggs fan. I'm not a Bo Sox fan. But I would totally have this on my wall because it's just gorgeous. Cheap excuse to have it, but well worth it. It's not as cool as the Benny Santiago card, though. And the Benny card, it's just, this is great. We see bird's eye views from time to time. How often do you see a ball's eye view? I mean, this is one where you're really hoping that the photographer positioned himself above securely, because if not, poor photographer, poor catcher, it's going to be pretty ugly. I love the way that it looks. This is a card I want to talk about, but I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious why it's cool. It's pretty obvious what it is. Love this card. But is there any wonder that the best card to me is the Walt Weiss card? I mean, this is all time. If I was in a competition, or if I was in any sort of a discussion about the greatest card of all time, I would bring this not as the greatest card per se, but I would bring this into the discussion as the best image of any card, period, bar none. I've never been captured by another image the way that I have with this. It is magnificent. This is the card that I want as a poster. There are a lot of cards I've looked at and gone, that'd be a cool poster. This one I need as a poster. I have made a poster size card. It looks awesome. This one I desperately want to get the negative of this so that I can create the poster size card. I need to do that. It is something that I need to do because it is just absolutely magnificent. I love this card. And yeah, that's about it. So to me, these are the best cards in this set. There are some other cards I pulled out and thought about talking about, but at the end of the day, I mean, the Nolan Ryan card is a cool card, but it's not a great card, on and on. This is a card set that a baseball card set that I actually like looking through. For me, I'm not baseball, so it doesn't pull me in, but the images really do carry. And these are the ones that for me always catch my eye and really pull me in. There are a few others that do catch my eye, but I don't think they quite fit in this discussion. So let me know what your take is on this in the comments below. If you think there is one of the other cards that I really should have mentioned, and there are a few I can think of that would probably fit. And I will be moving on to 1992. I know that a couple of you have just passed out with shock that it's actually going to happen, but I am going to hit 1992. Kind of excited about that. I'm wondering what 1992 is going to be like, because it's been so long since I've seen it that I've kind of forgotten at this point. Other than that, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check out my other videos. And thank you very much for watching.